Hello and welcome to the Rugby Show here on the 42.ie. Ireland have levelled the series with Australia with a first victory over the Wallabies on Australian soil since this day, actually 39 years ago. Joining me to discuss this morning's action, or this evening's action to him, it is the man at work down under, Murray Kinsella. How are things, Murray? Do you enjoy yourself?
Yeah, good, Gavin. Another brilliant match, I thought. What a series we're getting. Like, this is the ideal scenario. Go to Sydney next weekend with a decider, a final almost. And yeah, certainly Ireland were chirpier in their post-match press conference there now. So yeah, lots to look forward to next weekend, but a much improved performance today.
What were the key differences then? Obviously we would have discussed earlier in the week the personnel changes, but just in Ireland's general approach, where were they better, do you reckon, this time around than they were last weekend?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, they managed to hang on to the ball a lot better. Their ball retention was really good. Simple errors like they had last weekend with just a couple of poor passes, guys not hitting the ruck early enough. That kind of stuff was definitely shored up. I thought they were very aggressive in how they cleared out bodies. Just spoke to Rob Kearney and he said he saw the greatest clear out of his career from Tadhg Furlong. So I'm looking forward to having a look back through the game for that one. But I think it was symptomatic of a much improved breakdown performance. Also, Israel Folau didn't have as big an effect on this game at all as he did in the first test. They managed him a lot better, both through pressuring the kickers. You saw them actually getting kind of wide angles to close down those kickers. So they couldn't do as many of those crossfield kicks to Folau. And they also shepherded him off the ball a lot more. You know, if you look back through the game, you'll see guys running across his running line as he goes through the ball and just not allowing him get up into the air earlier. Also, Keith Earls, who they switched over to that wing, got up in the air really well, really good technically, getting that front knee out in front, jumping that arc onto the 45-degree angle onto the ball as well. So it was a better contest individually. I thought that was really key. Folau didn't have one of those big moments that kind of changed the game. David Pocock was an effect on the breakdown still. He got a couple of turnovers, but Peter O'Mahony was probably the most effective player there in terms of the number of penalties, 3 turnover penalties. A couple of them I thought were definitely questionable in terms of elbows or hands down the ground, but he was playing to the referee's standard, I guess, in that area, and he did that really well. On top of that as well, the scrum, you know, an early scrum penalty from Healy, and Niall Scannell was really good, I thought, around the pitch as well as at scrum time, and of course Furlong, who was man of the match. That was a really dominant moment early in the game, and after they had messed up in that area and been disappointed and frustrated with themselves in that 68 minutes last week, they got that right. So generally across the board, everything was more accurate, everything was more aggressive, and it was more like the Ireland that we'd seen in the Six Nations.
100%, yeah. I suppose in spite of the fact that it was what will hopefully transpire to be a famous victory, and definitely one will look back upon fondly regardless of the outcome next weekend, if you look at the first half in particular, like Australia got into Irish territory twice and scored twice. It was like, compared to the chances we were creating, wherein, you know, we were spurning maybe 8 or 9 decent opportunities to have a proper chip off them. Did you feel like the execution of certain things was a little bit off today, given how dominant actually Ireland were and how much they controlled possession and the game in general?
Yeah, well, I mean, we know the Wallabies are going to be able to score tries out of nothing, even when they're not as at their best. You know, I don't think collectively that was a strong performance by any means as they were in the first test. 15 penalties conceded was massive, and a lot of silly, needless ones in there that allowed Ireland to keep that scoreboard ticking over. And the yellow card was very costly for Marika Koroibete. 13 points in that passage or that 10-minute spell while he was off the pitch. So that was very costly. The first try, I thought that Ireland started the match a little bit like they'd been last week, was a sloppy kick-off reception. They put it into touch. And then, a simple defensive error. Levy kind of follows the ball, and CJ Sander inside probably just turns off a little bit and gets cut out on that beautiful line by Beale. Like, it was exceptional play. I thought Foley did really well. He took the link pass from Coleman and he really went at the line, drew in Levy and leaves the ball up for Beale to finish superbly. So that was a worrying start, but thereafter I thought Ireland managed the game quite well, and Johnny Sexton being back was huge. He changes the nature of how they play. He challenges the line consistently, brilliant tactically, even that early kick down the right-hand side, the low spiral kick, and that eventually leads to a penalty. Those little details make such a big difference. And I thought all those returning kind of frontline players did make a big impact. You know, Gary Ringrose had a couple of sloppy moments, as Joe Schmidt alluded to after the game, but he also had some lovely creative play. That pass for the Tadhg Furlong break in particular, a lovely skip pass, and we've said before here that Ireland needed that creative touch maybe in midfield. Ringrose brought that, and he tackled really superbly as well. But you saw, like, the Wallabies were never truly out of it. When Ireland kicked that last penalty, in the 65th minute, I think it was. You kind of felt, oh, this game's over, but the Wallabies come back, and I don't think Schmidt would be too happy with how the game ended. That penalty and yellow card for Jack McGrath, the hands in the ruck was cynical, really, and needless. When you're defending, that suddenly brings the Wallabies back into the game, and last 2 minutes of the game you're kind of clinging on, and they did that quite well, albeit with Joey Carberry replacing Dev Toner. A surprising change, but as Schmidt said, fortunately they didn't have to throw him up in the line out, and they clung on. But yeah, the Wallabies were never out of it, and by no means is this series over. By no means are Ireland going to go to Sydney and just blow them out of the water next weekend. I think they'll be very disappointed. Cheika's team with a lot of elements of their performance, and we'll probably see a response next weekend. Yeah,
so what were the two head coaches like afterwards, Murray? Obviously Joe Schmidt would be reasonably satisfied, I'm sure. Was there a little bit of disappointment on behalf of Cheika? I mean, both of them obviously would have predicted this series to be close anyway. It's one apiece going into the last one. You can't ask for much more, certainly from the neutrals' perspective, and we've seen some pretty good rugby from both sides as well.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Schmidt was in flying form, very chirpy, really happy with some of the set-piece stuff they did. They manufactured that beautiful line break for Keith Earls, and it was one of those clever little plays that he tends to come up with. They didn't finish that off. Earls gets tackled by Nick Phipps really well, but eventually Tyke Furlong gets over to kind of seal all that pressure. He was upbeat. I mean, even on the injury front, Conway goes off early, Levy off at halftime, and Healy also. The injury update there was pretty positive. He said Conway got a hip pointer, and he should be okay to train by Tuesday. He said Cian Healy got a smack on the AC joint, and he's also positive there. And Levy took a bang to the sternum. So they're relatively positive. Those guys are going to come around and potentially be in the mix for next weekend. On the other side, the Australians have lost Will Genia. He broke his arm, and he's going to go for surgery tomorrow. So that's a big blow for them. Phipps did okay when he came on, but I think Genia is in a different class, and they'll miss him certainly next again. They were downbeat, but no, it's definitely all on the line, and I think they will be better next weekend. I think they'll be frustrated with how things went tonight. Looking at, say, I suppose, perspective changes to the team for next weekend, then obviously, it's, again, I suppose, about striking the balance between going down there and winning a series, which would be fantastic, and also, blooding certain players. You mentioned Ty Byrne might come back in. Can we expect many changes from this side, or how do you think Schmidt is going to play it? Yeah, I mean, it's a hard one to call. Does he continue with this element of experimentation within a strong team that we've seen so far? He indicated that would be the case afterwards. He said, we only have 10 test matches now until the World Cup. So what that experimentation is, I'm not quite sure. I thought Niall Scannell, who had the biggest start of his career, I thought he did really well. His line-out throwing was good. Scrum, we mentioned, and around the pitch, really strong contact. Threw one loose offload that I'd be disappointed with, but a good shift from him. They did lose the line-out immediately when Rob Herring came on, just a slight underthrow. Pretty tough to come on and throw straight away. But Joe Schmidt was really happy with him too. So there's been development of that hooker position, which is really promising to see. As you mentioned, Ty Byrne comes on and a couple of lovely tackles. Chatting to him after the game, he mentioned that Bernard Foley nearly handed him off early on, and he got a little bit worried there. That kind of got him into the game. But really positive to have him come through after a brilliant season, a couple of seasons rather, with the Scarlets as well. And Jordan Armour continues to get lots of game time. That's a real positive. Obviously, losing Conway was a disappointment after his early try. I thought he did well getting in low and finishing that score. But Larmour, on the flip side, gets a lot of game. And gosh, he's just so exciting when he gets the ball. The speed his feet move at, and I think no one really knows what's going to happen when he gets on the ball. Tends to be something pretty positive though in the end. So there has been that element of experimentation and development definitely of the squad. What it is next weekend, I'm not quite sure. Ross Byrne is the only player who hasn't been involved at all. So he'll obviously hope for a run out. But realistically, you're going to Sydney trying to win a first Test series in 1979. And that's a huge carrot. And after the game, all the players and Joe Schmidt were talking about wanting to make a bit of history and kind of break that long run of losing series here. So I think it'll be pretty much full strength or close to, maybe with one or two little surprise selections again. But it is going to be full on, I think. And in terms of a tactical approach, then I suppose we would have spoken last week about what Ireland could have tweaked a little bit in order to be more successful as they were this morning. Going to next weekend, you're coming off a win. I suppose the tweaks are probably going to be a little bit more minor. Is there anything that they'll feel they can improve upon? Obviously, again, going back to the possession, I mean, really they control the game, and to win it by only a score essentially probably didn't do their performance justice. Is it just about being a little bit more clinical next weekend? Yeah, I think that is the major thing. I suppose that's been an issue really for Ireland intermittently over the last couple of years. They tend to get those line breaks, and while they may not be like as searing as the furlong one was all the time, there are chances there. I think they'll be disappointed with Heather finishing in behind. And you actually saw the support play I thought was better, like Ringrose for that furlong one, and also the Keith Earls break. He got into good support positions, but that pass just didn't go. And the opportunity was spurned. I think furlong was a little bit, when a tight end prop gets into that much space, it can be pretty daunting. And he did okay, and it looked great with the floated pass attempt over the head. But I think they'll be disappointed not to have finished.
The universe would have imploded if that pass came off.
yeah, they would have. But after that, a phase later, Beale does well to shut down Sexton, and then Murray kicks the ball dead, which has been a bit of an issue on this tour. Some of the kicking hasn't been great once they're in behind. So those little tweaks will definitely bring them to a far more complete performance. I think there's definitely still more to come from Ireland. I think defensively they'll look for chopping down the space for the Wallabies in those turnover situations. And again, 3 tries conceded won't be too pleasing for Andy Farrell, as well as that getting mauled over your own try line for Simon Easterby, the forwards coach, is a big one. So there's lots there to work on, just the way Schmidt likes it, but with a bit of confidence back in Ireland's step now going into the decider.
100%. A couple of comments before we let you go. Barry Clark just pointing out that we need more tries for our amount of possession, as you were just alluding to there. And Dara McFionnan, I think. Apologies, Dara, if I've botched that. He just says O'Mahony was awesome, and I don't think anybody really is going to disagree with that today. Murray, we'll let you go before you get locked in there in Melbourne. Enjoy the week, and we'll catch up with you again on Thursday, I suppose.
Thanks very much.
Tom, man. Good luck. And thanks a million for you guys at home watching as well. Hope you enjoyed the game this morning. We'll be back on Thursday to discuss the Ireland team ahead of that decisive third test. And have a good week until then. Enjoy the World Cup and all that. Mind yourselves. Cheers.